Good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. So today I'm going to do the actual practice of Chöd that comes from Chögyal Namkhai, from which the practice of feeding your demons is derived. And I thought I would talk about that a little bit, and then there will be, thanks for the hearts, everybody. I thought I would explain how to do it if you are simply receiving it as a healing practice, and how to do it together if you're practicing at home. So before we begin, let's take a moment and generate our motivation. Seeing lots of nice hearts coming through, so that's the love. We need that right now, right? We need love, and we need to support each other. So let's generate our heartfelt motivation, our bodhicitta, and the motivation for this particular time that we have together this morning, doing the practice of Chöd and receiving it, that this is for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Thank you, everybody. So the practice of Chöd evolved in the 11th century in Tibet, and it was really established by a female teacher named Chögyal Namkhai. Ma Chik means one mother, Ma is mother, and Chik is one. And Lap is the name of her family clan, and Drun is torch. For a long time, we believed that Lap was the area of Tibet that she was from, but in doing more research in Tibet about this, we discovered that actually Lap is the name of her family clan that is in a certain valley, the Dranang Valley in Tibet. It's not the name of like an area or a state in Tibet. In any case, that's the meaning of Lap, and Drun means torch. So she's the one mother torch from the clan of Lap. This practice is quite unique in the Tibetan tradition, in that we are practicing offering our bodies rather than trying to protect ourselves or generate something for ourselves. Of course, all Tibetan practice is based on bodhicitta, on doing it for the benefit of all beings, but there's many practices where you're protecting yourself and you wear a protection, amulets and so on. There's mantras of protection. The Chöd is really quite different in that sense, because you're actually asked when you receive the practice or when you do it to take off your protection amulets, which is right now, it's kind of a scary idea, but this was the teaching of Machik was, one, take me, eat me is better than 100,000 protect me, save me. So that idea of moving toward the fear, toward that which you think is going to destroy you, and offering, letting go of the fixation on self, on ego clinging. And that's the meaning of the word Chöd, means to sever or to cut. And so this practice was popularized at that time in the 11th century. And then it went on as an independent lineage for about 8 generations after Chögyal Namkhai. And then gradually her independent stream was dissolved into other lineages. And one of the things that we have been doing, that I have been focused on since 2006, when I had a vision of Machik in which she requested me to do this, is to find her lineage and reestablish it as a unique lineage. And I've been supported in doing this by His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, who gave me and a lot of other people, around 1,000 other people, the Chöd empowerment at my request. And he spoke about supporting this effort. We've also had a Chöd conference and are doing that at Taramandal in the lineage of finding her lineage and reestablishing it. So that's been my effort, and Feeding Your Demons is really a way to make the essence of what Machik taught accessible in the West in a way that people wouldn't even know it came from Tibet or it was a Buddhist practice. So that's what I taught a couple of weeks ago. Now, today, what I'd like to do is to just perform the practice of Chöd for you, and as many as have the transmission and are with us today will be doing it with us. And so we'll be an etheric circle of Chöd practitioners, and we'll be working specifically today with the COVID-19 virus and feeding that, as well as the fear that is coming up around that, as well as the other things that we normally feed in Chöd, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so on, the protectors, all sentient beings. But our practice today will be focusing on this particular situation that we're in right now in the world, which is unprecedented. And one thing I wanted to say was that actually the practice of Chöd was done in Tibet during epidemics, during contagious epidemics. It was the practice of Chöd that was considered to be the most effective in stopping epidemics. Why? Because the Chöd practitioners worked with the energy or the entity of that disease. And then they were able to go into areas where it was happening, where the epidemic was happening, and work with the ill practice for them, as well as remove the corpses of the dead without getting infected themselves. So it's extremely appropriate for this time. This is a time of contagious epidemic that's worldwide. And so why would we not bring to bear the Chöd practice at this time? It's a perfect time to do it. And I'm doing it every night myself. And I hope that others could commit to a daily practice of Chöd, those who practice it. The general time that Chöd is traditionally done when you're just doing it once a day was around sunset, in that time between the worlds, the twilight zone. And so if you can do it at that time, fine. Otherwise, any time is fine. But I think if all the Chöd practitioners of the world, and of course not only this lineage, but all lineages, could be working with the virus, perhaps that could have an impact. So I hope that everybody is doing that. I imagine that they are. So the practice that we're going to do today is from Chögyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, who was a great Dzogchen master who passed away not so long ago at the end of 2018 in October. And he dreamt this practice. He was an amazing dreamer. It was really a siddha that he had, a siddhi. He was a siddha of dream, and it was a siddhi or a power that he had to dream. And this is the dreaminess practice was sort of one of his more minor dreams. Just his dreams were incredible. He would dream entire practices, which he could write down later. He would go into other dimensions frequently, receive practices and information, receive melodies, receive dances that were extremely precise, and where he would go back and then the dakinis would correct, say, the foot movement in a particular dance. So this was a dream that he had in the 70s. And it is a combination of various different Chöd practices. It draws from them, all practices that he knew, and they just came to him like this in the dream. And the dream was that he was facing south and he was facing a group of Westerners. This is in the 70s. And there were very few people practicing the Dharma in the 70s. And he noticed that they all had the Chöd drum and bell. And at that time, really, almost no one had the Chöd drum and bell in the West. And he thought, that's strange. And then there was a woman who got up from the crowd and she offered him a drum. And it wasn't a typical Chöd drum that looks like this. It was more like a shamanic drum, which has just one face, but it had the things that were hit on either side. In any case, she gave him that drum, and it made him sort of remember his own Chöd drum, which he had left in Sikkim when he came to Italy. And that drum, his original drum, and he said he remembered it with some longing, some nostalgia, was actually the drum of Dokensei Yeshe Dorje, the great Terton, who lived from 1800 to 1862. And so he had Dokensei's drum, but he left it in Sikkim and it disappeared. When he went back, it was gone. He never saw it again. So somewhere that drum is in someone's hands. And hopefully they know what it is and they're valuing it and taking care of it. In any case, he got the drum, picked up his drum, he had a bell, and then they all picked up their traditional Chöd drums and bells, and he began this practice and he sang it like it is, like this melody that we will do today. And afterwards, when he woke up from the dream, he wrote it down. So it's a combination of the Kanto Kejang, which is the strong laughter of the Dakinis, from the Terma of Jigme Lingpa, Longchen Ningtik, has words and lines from that. It also has words and lines from Machik Lapton's oral tradition, Rinchen Trengwa, and it also has some words from the sutras. So those are the three traditional sources that it comes from. What he said about this Chöd is it contains everything. It contains all the necessary aspects of Chöd practice, but it's short. And so I've now taught this for many years, since the mid-'80s. I've been teaching this Chöd practice under the guidance of Chögyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. And so I've taught it in many countries and many situations. And this is what I found, is that it is short, it's doable. So people from all different cultures who speak all different languages, we do it in Tibetan because the melodies are linked to the words. And these are melodies that he dreamt, and they're traditional melodies. And so he taught many practices which were not necessarily in Tibetan, but this practice has remained in Tibetan because of that, because of the traditional melodies, and because of how he heard it originally. And so that's how we will do it. And what I found is that people can learn it. I've taught it in Poland, I've taught it in Russia, I've taught it in Europe, all over the place, and in the United States. I've taught it in Bali, many different places. But what I've seen is that it is really appropriate for this time because it is fairly short, it's doable, it's manageable, and so it's able to spread and be done. If a practice is too complicated or too culturally specific, it's hard for it to spread beyond the boundaries of the Tibetan or Bhutanese or whatever culture, which doesn't devalue in any way those kinds of true practices. Those are extremely powerful and wonderful. I'm just distinguishing the qualities of this particular one. So during the practice, what happens is you exit from the top of your head. Your consciousness goes out of the top of your head and into the heart of the wrathful Dakini trauma. And then your body is a corpse, right? Because your consciousness is out, therefore your body's a corpse. And then trauma takes her trigu, her hook knife, and she cuts around the top of your skull, creates a cup out of the skull. It expands to be 3,000 times bigger than it was. And then the rest of the corpse is chopped up, or actually put inside and then chopped up. And then it is transformed through a sort of alchemical process of masculine and feminine coming together. The dross spoils over the top. There's heat that comes from underneath. And a nectar is created, which then becomes the nectar which feeds the demons, and in this case, the demon of the disease. So, and then there's a part after that, which is called the gift of the teachings, in which you offer teachings to those guests which you have invited to feast from the skull cup. And so there's two feasts. There's the feast of the nectar from the skull cup, and then there's the gift of the teaching, so that's sort of a second level. And then there's some ending aspirational prayers, dedication of merit, and so on. And before that whole process of the body offering, there is the introductory invitation to the lamas, the yidams, dakinis, the deities, and so on, to come to witness you. There's refuge. There's the raising of bodhicitta in this very profound Dzogchen way. And then also the mandala offering, again in a very profound form. And then a beautiful invocation to Machik Lapdran that was given to her son, Tonyam Somdrup. Her son, Tonyam Somdrup, requested a prayer to call her, to invoke her presence after she passed away. And she said, she gave this, O Machik Mala Sawadam, that prayer. And she said, if 3 or more people are doing this together, I will be there. I will be present. So it's going to be 3 or more people of us doing this, so we can feel the real presence of Machik Lapdran. So that's the Guru Yoga section, and that's followed then by the body offering. So there's those sort of Nundro preliminaries, the actual body offering, and then the gift of the teachings, and finally aspirational prayers and dedication of merit. So that's the structure of the practice. So what you'll hear when we're actually doing the offering, I'll use my thigh bone trumpet at the beginning of that. This is used, it's called the kanling, to call the guests. And then we'll do Oma Hom Pet, Oma Hom Pet, Oma Hom Pet. And that's the Oma Hom Pet is the Jangpel Jur, or the purification, Jangpel to increase and Jur to transform. So that's transforming, increasing and purifying the nectar in the skull cup. And then the pet is the actual offering, when you actually see the guests coming to eat it. And so that's the time when, if you're receiving this as a healing, you just open, you don't have to do anything, but that's the time when you can feel negativities leaving your body and so on. It's the time of the kind of core of the practice. And it's kind of random. It could be Oma Hom Pet, Oma Hom Pet, different sounds according to who's coming as the guest at that time. And so for those of you who are doing the practice, now would be a good time to prepare, get your drum and your bell ready. And then for those of you who are receiving the practice as a blessing, you can lie down for it. And actually, it's fine if you fall asleep. Often people do. And you're doing this with a group of people in a room, which is usually how we do it. It's pretty loud, but still people fall asleep. And even people who have issues. I did it for someone once who had never fallen asleep for 15 years without really heavy medications. I did Chöd for him, and he actually fell asleep. So that was actually the beginning of his healing from that particular illness. So don't worry if you fall asleep, and if you don't, that's fine too. And so at the end, after we finish, and by the way, the practice will take about 20-25 minutes, I will answer any questions that have been posted in the comments. Somebody's collecting them for me, and I'll look at them, and then we'll have a little time for that. Okay, ready? Yeah. So now we're going to begin this Chögyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche's Chöd practice that he received in a dream. And please join me if you know the practice, and if not, receive it. You can lie down, you can sit, and you can watch if you want to. However you want to relate to it is fine. Just get settled in here myself. And begin. Ready. Thank you. Did a little extra Tarshan Jadu Drupa show at the end because I was remembering Rinpoche. Sometimes when we do it, he just repeat that line again and again. And it means may all my chinle, or my enlightened or enlightening activities kind of come to fruition, or complete themselves in the rainbow body, the body of light. Meaning, at the time of death, may my own body dissolve into light and not leave a physical corpse, which is the goal, I guess you could say, of the goalless Dzogchen practice, is the rainbow body, or the body of light. And so that line is really summing up that aspiration to reach the rainbow body. I did this so many times with him in so many different places. I remember one time we were at Marigar, at his center in Italy, and it's up on a mountain, pretty wild place for Italy, and he just went out, and it was night, and we just went around the land at Marigar and did Chöd in all these different places. And I think he was demonstrating, without really saying it, the Nyensa pilgrimage, which is the pilgrimage to difficult places where you practice in the dark and you practice in challenging places. And of course, it wasn't that dangerous or that challenging there in Italy, but a little bit, wandering around in the dark. Of course, we were all together, and really with the Nyensa pilgrimage, you do it by yourself. And you actually are supposed to get scared and then work with that fear. So Chöd works with fear, and that's another reason why it's appropriate for these times, because these are the times of fear. I mean, there's like fear all over the planet. People who are not normally afraid are kind of being taught to be afraid, because that's why we stay home, is because of the fear of getting the virus. And those medical workers, those people out on the front lines, my son-in-law is one of them, because he's managing the med center in Telluride. They're like our bodhisattvas who are just going forward in spite of the fear, and for the benefit of beings in a very real day-to-day sense. So let's just pause for a moment and send out a big wave of gratitude to those people who are putting themselves in danger daily, being on the front lines of this. And thank the doctors and all the medical workers, the paramedics, and all the ambulance drivers and so on that are working right there as bodhisattvas on the front lines. Okay. Oh, no. Now I'll look at questions. I don't see any questions. Let's see, I'm looking here. Okay, no questions yet. Lots of hearts and love. Thanks, everybody. The video will remain here of the practice. We will stay on Facebook, and I think we're trying to find a way to get it onto YouTube also. And yeah, this is a good practice for these times. So YouTube practitioners who are out there, please do it daily and work with this. It'd be interesting to hear, maybe you could put in the comments if you saw the virus and what it looked like, that would be interesting to see. I saw it today. I see it always as a red female, very angry and hot. And then today, after being fed, she transformed into a red female being, very beautiful, very peaceful, luminous red. So, yeah, everybody's will be different, most likely, because we're all different. We see things differently. Let's see something there. Oh, when we do this practice, do we invite the virus or the fear of the virus? Yeah, both. You can work with both, the virus and the fear of the virus. Um, Specifically, the Chöd practitioners would work with the virus itself when they would go into places where there was an epidemic. So they would be feeding that virus. So the virus is feeding on people, right? And or maybe animals if it's an epidemic involving animals. And so if it's removed, if it's being fed somewhere else, it can be removed from feeding on those beings. So we feed it through the skull cup and hopefully satisfy it. And then you can also work with the fear of the virus in the same way that, you know, perhaps you did feeding your demons with me last time and you saw the fear. What did that look like? You could feed that in the practice. And then also you can invite the virus to come out of the people that it is eating, devouring, and feed from the skull cup. So there's three different things. One, the virus itself is just floating around, and the other is pulling it out of the people who are ill, and the other is the fear or whatever's coming up around the virus. And then there's a question about the pet that I shouted several times. First time I shouted it was leaving the body, so it's like a poa practice done leaving the body before I visualized myself entering the body of the Dakini, and then the corpse being placed into the skull cup and chopped up and turned into nectar. That was the first one. And then during the feeding, the pet is the actual moment that you're feeding. So the Oma Hom, you probably couldn't hear it because it wasn't distinct, but I was saying Oma Hom, Oma Hom, Oma Hom. So that's the Jang Pel Jur, the purification. Jang Pel is increase, and Jur is to transform of the offerings, making them transforming, purified, and so on. And then the pet is the actual moment when you feed. The word pet or the sound pet is connected to the Chöd practice very deeply. It's used in a lot of different ways throughout the practice and also in the tradition of Machi Lapdran. It's sounded. It is traditionally used as a way to cut through discursive thoughts. It's used also in Dzogchen and Mahamudra in that way. In Chöd, it sort of punctuates and worked with in a lot of different ways within the practice. In that case, it's in the actual feeding. The sound pet has two parts, the pet and the te, and that's the union of skillful means and wisdom, or the masculine and feminine in that one word. And actually, Peter Oosthausen wrote a paper about pet and all the ways that it's used in the Tibetan tradition, particularly in the Chöd. We could perhaps post a link to that, his paper about that if you're interested. And by the way, I wanted to announce that Lopen Charlotte Rotterdam and her husband, Peter Oosthausen, will be hosting next Sunday's event, I guess you could call this Facebook Live event. And they will be teaching compassion practices for these times. And they're also doing a daily, during the week, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 6 to 6:30 Mountain Time, they're doing a daily guided practice in compassion, different practices each day. And we'll post a link to that also. These are really wonderful. I have tuned into some of them, and they're wonderful. Together, they teach together often, and these practices that they've been leading have been wonderful. So I encourage you to tune into that. And then I also wanted to say that the Chöd practice, learning the Chöd, if you're like, oh, I want to learn that, you can. And we are having a retreat right now, beginning on May 28th at Tara Mandala in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. If it is deemed unsafe to hold it in person, it will be held online as a virtual retreat, as many of our retreats will be now. So we are releasing many of our what would have been in-person retreats as virtual retreats. And so if you're interested in that, and in a way it's kind of wonderful, because now these retreats that would have been limited to people who could actually get to Colorado and get to Tara Mandala are going to be much more accessible. And we're doing all those virtual retreats as pay it forward retreats, meaning you make an offering and then you can receive that back. You sort of register and make an offering. You can receive that back at the end if you choose, or you can offer that and offer more forward so that somebody else could attend in the future. So basically, we're not charging for any of those virtual retreats. It's based on bodhicitta, on offering for the benefit of those who come after you. So we'll put that, those will be on our website. They'll also be posted here on my page and also on the Tara Mandala Facebook page. This is Lama Tsultrim Allione, that's my public figure page. And then our website is taramandala.org, TARAMANDALA.org. And I'll look for more questions if there are. Will this practice help with the invisible beings like mamos and nagas? Nagas are the water spirits and mamos are wrathful female spirits. Yes, absolutely, it does. And you know, this disease is a mamo. So diseases are entities. When you think about it, you know, we talk about, let's say, a cancer being an aggressive cancer. They have personalities, and this is a very wrathful entity, this energy that's involved with this virus. And I don't mean to say that in sort of magical way, but in the sense that really they are. I mean, when you think about what is a virus, it's a life form, it's an energy form, which has its own characteristics and it spreads, right? So, and bacteria are the same. Illnesses have characteristics. This has these very specific characteristics. And so these are energies or entities, and that's not magical thinking. They are energies and they are entities. In science, we can see them, but even before we could see them, they were still there. So, yeah. Let's see. We're going to offer the Long, or the hearing transmission for this Chöd practice, which will be given in the future on May 2nd. And we're going to keep going with these Sunday 10 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Mountain, and so on, gatherings, virtual gatherings. And so next week will be Lopin, Charlotta, and Peter with compassion practices. And then that time we'll announce the following one. And we'll also be announcing virtual retreats, as well as we have our usual online retreats. For example, right now there is online Wisdom Rising course going on, and that the last day you can register for that or join that is April 1st, so that's coming up. So these are all resources for you, and I hope this has been helpful to you, what I've done today. And oh, here's another question. Can you do the practice if you don't have a conlang? This is yield conlang. I don't trumpet. Yes, you can. In fact, Namkhai Norbu said don't use the conlang unless you're really an experienced Chöd practitioner, because they actually come when you call them with that. So yeah, absolutely. I would say most of the Dzogchen community people doing it don't use the conlang, and many of my students also don't. So that's no problem. Eventually, it's good to learn the conlang. I finally had a Lama tell me, you need to use the conlang. It's part of the practice. So I didn't start using it until probably about 10 years ago. And then it was Lama Wangdu, and he said, you need to use it. It's part of it. So I started using it. And by the way, Lama Wangdu is an amazing Chöd master, beautiful, compassionate Lama based in Portland, Oregon, who teaches Chöd, and it's been also to Tar Mandala, and he's probably the sort of, I guess you could say, the main well-known Lama teaching in the Chöd lineage of Lama Tsultrim. And then here's another question. Can you please advise a practice to follow this? As a supplement, it brings me a lot of negativity and suffering after the practice. I'm not sure why that would be true. I think that probably if that's happening, you're not practicing correctly, because if you've done it correctly, there would be no negativity or suffering that would follow. So be sure you're generating bodhicitta at the time of the practice, and that you really feed the demons to complete satisfaction during the practice. However, if you end up with some residue and you want to work with that, do feeding your demons around the feeling that you're getting in your body. What does that negativity feel like? And then do demon work with that, and that will definitely clear it. And find the ally at the end to support you. So, yeah. So I'm excited. I'm actually really excited to meet with everybody in this way. It feels, of course, different. I can't see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. But I can feel you. I can feel your presence. And I love how international it is, and that we are able to support each other and find each other in these times when we have to distance in a physical way. We can find each other even more than we normally would in this more etheric way. And I think that's a real blessing that we do have the internet at this time. It's so difficult. And thanks for all the love, everybody. It's great to receive your love, and sending it out, giving it back, offering it out to all beings. So I think we'll close here today. I'll just make sure there's nothing else. I think that's it. And yeah, great gratitude to Chögyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche for this Chöd practice, and for everything that he gave me in his life, and so many. He served so many beings all around the world. What an amazing Dzogchen master. Just extraordinary. And so gratitude to him in whatever dimension he is now, and to all of his students who practice this lineage. And thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll connect again next week. And you can connect with Lopan Charlotta and Peter every day, Monday through Friday, 6 to 6:30 on in Mountain Time. Practices of compassion for this time. So that can be your in-between connection here. And we have more that we'll be announcing, some exciting things that we're planning coming up. So, okay. Bye for now. Lots of love.